Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Peace be upon you all. I had a little audio issue, but this is our first live stream for our evolution course. So, first of all, um, let's together remember what our episode was about. So, I'll share with you the episode, and we will do our first session, and we'll do a review to what was there, and I'll also make some comments. And then the important part of this is going through your questions and answering them.
Peace be upon you all, and welcome to this first lesson of our introductory course about the theory of evolution. In this lesson, we will understand first what is the theory of evolution and why it is a matter of so much debate. So let's go. So let's start by looking at the observations that we have related to the living creatures. Number one, living creatures have great similarities to each other. So birds look like birds. Tigers, there are many different kinds of tigers, but they are tigers. They look like each other. Fish have great similarity to each other, etc., etc. But we notice something else, that those different creatures that have great similarities also have variations, for example, according to where they are. And we notice that this variation makes that creature very fit to its environment, very fit to its habitat. There is a third observation, that the more we dug the ground and we go to deeper and deeper layers, and those deeper layers correspond in our mind to older and older time, and we find what we know as fossils, and those fossils are essentially skeletons of very old creatures. We have the observation that the deeper you go in time, the simpler the creatures generally become. So, looking at all of that, there was a need for a theory that explains why living creatures have those features. So Charles Darwin proposed the following theory, that the reason for the great similarities between creatures is that they are coming from common ancestors. And the reason there is fitness of those creatures to their environments is because there is a force of nature known as natural selection, which essentially means that an organism that is more fit in a certain environment has better chances to reproduce, and the ones that have better chances to reproduce become dominant in that environment and kick out the ones that do not have the same better chances for reproduction. But how would the ancestors develop into all those varying creatures? It is because there is variation between one generation and the next generation. And the more you go deeper in time, the more you go into layers and layers of this family tree, of this ancestry, and essentially you will, according to him, reach at the end a single common ancestor for the whole tree. And let's call this the least universal common ancestor. And Darwin proposed that God breathed life in that first cell. It's a unicellular organism, and out of that, the whole tree of life unfolded. So the picture is like this. There are generations after generation. From generation to generation, there is variations, and those variations between the different siblings are under natural selection, and natural selection in the different environments causes each population in an environment to be more fit to the environment, because only the variations that make them more fit are selected, and hence creatures diversify. And as time passes and as the environment changes, the variations also introduce complexity, and the complexities that also introduce fitness advantages get selected, and hence life gets more and more complex. Now, this is the story. Before this story, people used to think that creatures were independent creations and that the way they look were fixed. But Darwin came and said that the observations, especially the observations from the fossils, suggest that there is this time-related change, and that this time-related change suggests that this family tree, this tree of life, exists. Darwin did not know about genetics, so the mechanism by which this variation takes place was not very clear until the 60s, where the genetics and the double helix and the DNA were discovered, and then we have an understanding why a creature looks a certain way or has certain features. It's because his genes are creating his design. There's information in the genes, and this information makes the creature look the way it looks. And then we understood also from Mendel, much earlier than that, that there are specific mechanisms that govern the inheritance of the traits or the features from the parents to the children. When genetics was discovered, then this matter of variation that Charles Darwin proposed, and with our understanding of inheritance, then the theory of Darwin needed to be rewritten, because we knew that variation in genetic code through the mechanisms that we know about, like inheritance, is limited to the features that are already in the genetic code. So if somebody has brown hair and his wife has black hair, then their kids, if there is only the black and the brown features of the hair in their genes, the kids can only have black or brown. You will not get, for example, a brunette or somebody who is blonde. And
okay, so someone actually made a comment to me here that maybe there will also be shades of brown and black, which is okay. I did not say that shades are not possible. I'm saying that an allele that is not in the genetic code altogether cannot just appear from two parents who did not have this allele altogether. And maybe I should have said red hair, for example, instead of brunette, because actually some people see brunette as, or actually brunette is a dark brown color.
due to this, there was a need for a mechanism that will justify the new things. So if you're starting from marine animals, if you're starting from fish, and you end up with terrestrial animals, and then you have birds, then you need to justify how gills became lungs. You need to justify how scales became skin. You need to justify how fins became limbs, etc., etc. So there was all this novelty that needed an explanation that is beyond the normal the normal mechanisms that we know about, the inheritance, the selection, and the drift. All of those will select from the existing features. And
all right, so also I've received some comments about this piece. So some people who are evolution proponents made a comment that gills didn't become lungs, and they are separate structures, and that fish scales did not become skin. So this is not the point that I was making here. I was making the point that evolutionary theory says that land animals were before or evolved from marine animals, fish essentially. And I was listing features of a fish. So I just gave 3 examples. One of them, that fish has gills, has scales, and has fins. Well, obviously land animals have lungs and skin and limbs instead. And either this transition can be explained by random mutation and natural selection, or it cannot be explained by this. Whether now the lung is a morphing of the gills, which evolutionists do not say, or that gills would go into atrophy and lungs would evolve completely de novo or from something else, like, for example, evolutionists propose that lungs evolved from gas bladders, while actually there are fish that has lungs quite old in the fossil record. Yet the question stands. We start from fish and we end with an animal. We need an explanation for this transition. Either this transition can be explained by random mutation and natural selection, which makes the theory true, or the transition cannot be explained by random mutation and natural selection. Not only for this transition, but also for other transitions in the theory. So this is a due comment.
And hence, there was this proposal that the primary mechanism that is introducing variation is random mutation. And random mutation means copying errors that happen during reproduction. And those copying errors will generate the variation, and then naturally.
All right, so I also received a comment, somebody who's a proponent of evolution who doesn't like the statement that random mutations are errors, but you know, hard luck, random mutations in the literature are errors or mistakes in the copying of genetic material. And his argument was that if random mutations are errors, it means if there is an error, it means that there is a baseline for what is correct. And since evolution is completely a naturalistic process that has no intent and no mind, there is no place to talk about something being correct and hence something else being an error. Well, the literature uses the term error because you have to talk to the literature, not to me. However, if we look at it, the purpose of the replication of the DNA or the reproduction process is actually to copy the DNA from the parent to the child, regardless the mechanism of reproduction, whether sexual or asexual or whatever. There is a process of copying DNA. And this process of copying is putting in plenty of energy into this copying and even into error correction mechanisms. At least 3 that I know about, error correction mechanisms. So this process is clearly trying to copy DNA faithfully. So when DNA is not copied faithfully, the literature calls that error a mutation. And this is what the literature. So I don't think that this comment has a place, but it was worth noting.
Selection will select the errors that give benefit. So in short, the theory of evolution is like this. There is universal common descent with modification by random mutation and natural selection. And we can consider this statement to represent what is known as modern synthesis or neo-Darwinism. It is the combination of the idea of Charles Darwin of common ancestry and the effect of natural selection with our understanding of genetics, proposing that random mutation is the engine that generates the variation and natural selection is the force that picks up the variations that give an advantage, and still that the whole tree of life will end up to a single universal common ancestor which we call LUCA, the least universal common ancestor. Where is the problem? The problem is that random mutations are random. They are errors. So the whole point of contention with the theory of evolution is not that there is diversity, is not that there is similarity, is not that there is change over time, because those are observations, those are facts. Some call these the fact of evolution, but this is not the contention. The contention is, the difference in opinion is whether the theory of evolution is the proper explanation for those facts.
So I wanted to make a comment here. So in many conversations, you would go with somebody who is an evolutionist and you would say, I do not accept evolution in the macro sense. And I would say, what are you talking about? Evolution is a fact. And when he does that, he is referring to the matter that when you look around you, you see that you have change over time in living things. And change over time is another name for evolution. But this is not the issue, because change over time can be explained in many ways, whether direct creation is happening over time, or whether the claimed evolution mechanism is happening, or there is an intentional change of the genetic material by an intelligent agent, or many other possibilities. And those possibilities, those explanations would be each would be called a theory. So when we challenge the theory of evolution or think whether it is true or false, we are challenging whether common ancestry is true, whether this evolution is through random process, and whether natural selection can fix this randomness and create novelty and create design. This is what it means to challenge the theory of evolution.
And why is there contention about this theory? It is because of the invocation of random mutations as the main driver, and the assertion that the whole tree of life, including humans, including plants, including animals, including fish, including birds, all of them, single-celled organisms, multicellular organisms, fungi, microbes, everything goes down to a single universal common ancestor. I hope that this introduction has given you an idea about, number one, what are the facts? Number two, why did we need a theory? Number three, what was the original theory? Number four, how this theory was edited after we understood genetics. Number five, what are the mechanisms that this theory proposes to be driving life? And number six, why there is controversy around the theory of evolution. So join us next lesson where we explore more about those mechanisms, starting with random mutation.
All right, so I also had another comment, somebody saying this, that there is no controversy in the scientific domain about the theory of evolution, and because we can show that there was a LUCA with genetics, and we can show mutations are random with normal distribution. Whether you cannot show that, actually you cannot show that there was a LUCA. What you can show is that there is a minimum set of genetic code that looks to be common between living creatures. Now, whether the explanation is that this common set is the minimum denominator that the designer put there because it is essential for the existence of life, or that there is a common ancestor or any other alternative, is actually what the theory is about. So no, you cannot show that there is a LUCA. You can make a theory, a hypothesis or a theory that there is a LUCA. and random mutations have normal distribution. This is not the issue, whether mutations have normal distribution or not. The issue is to prove that the changes in design from a previous creature or previous phenotype to a following phenotype with obvious changes in macroevolutionary context can actually be attributed to random mutation and natural selection. And another comment, somebody commented to me that there is contention. I said in the video that the point of contention is about the random mutation and natural selection being responsible. Says that there is contention because the religious people have got it in their mind that either evolution is right or God did it. This is a false dichotomy. Well, I'm not sure. If you care about truth, even if you don't believe in God or you don't want to believe in God, are you interested or not to see that evolution in the way, using the neo-Darwinian mechanism, is true or false? Now, whether you choose later to accept God or don't choose to accept God, this is a different issue. Obviously, without the Darwinian evolution in the picture, I wonder what people will have to resort to. Some would say, okay, there is a signature in the cell, there is an intelligent designer, but why not aliens? It's like pushing the can, because if you say aliens created life on Earth, who created aliens? You know, the universe has a limited lifespan. So if you just want to push the can, it solves nothing. It just shows that you are prejudiced to accept God created humans, but you are okay that aliens that you have no evidence for created humans, and then you will just ignore the question who created those aliens. So it is not a false dichotomy with the religious people.
Theory of evolution. So join us next lesson where we explore more about those mechanisms, starting with random mutation. If you have questions about the content of this episode, please do send me the questions according to the instructions in the description, and they will be answered in the Q&A session. Don't forget to subscribe and to share this episode with whom you love and those who are interested in this topic, and see you in lesson number 2.
Okay, so let's now go to your questions. First, let's see if there are comments while we were going through the video. So yeah, so we have here on the live chat, we have Otangelo says, hi Otangelo, says, science has not shown that there was a LUCA. Yes, I agree with you. It did not show there was a LUCA. It's still a speculation. It's still a hypothesis. And it is a common thing, you know, when you're talking to evolutionists, that they will tell you science proved this or science showed this. Well, it didn't. Free Your Mind says, wouldn't an evolutionist just say that the gills became lungs when the animal went to land and needed a new way to get oxygen and slowly formed lungs to get oxygen out of water? Well, their current literature does not say that the gills transformed into lungs. It says that lungs were formed through an evolutionary mechanism. Some speculate that they were an evolution to something called a gas bladder, which is a proposal that I really find hilarious. And actually, some traced lungs to quite old kinds of fish available in fossil record that predates even the gas bladders, if I remember correctly. Still does not explain how lungs came into existence. And if you want to take the lineage, you need to explain how lungs came to existence anyway. So whether they arrive here or there. All right. Okay, let's go to the questions that I've received from the participants who registered to the course. And we'll go into them one by one, and then if there are further comments on the questions, we'll take that, because I promised you guys that I will first answer the question. So I have question number one. It says, you mentioned that a person who goes to the gym often doesn't pass on the big muscles to the children, but then how would you explain black people's physique? And this question actually related to the extended episode on Evolution 1, Linguistics and Epistemology. It was not directly in the session that we have seen, because I've sent you on the email. This is the session and this is extended material. So this is the question here. And there is actually, the questions, some of the questions are quite long. So I will read the full text. I can put as much on the screen. So the rest of the text says, black people generally have a lot more muscle definition than others. Hopefully, I'm not stereotyping. Well, this is science. There is no stereotyping. So the children of black people have better muscle because the genetics of black people, or regardless which race you're talking about or which color of people, if genetics of specific people gives better building of the body, then you can expect that the children will have better muscle. It has nothing to do if the father went to the gym or not. So yeah. Second question was, you said that you don't believe in macroevolution. Does that mean you believe that there were many single cells that formed many species? And what about an all-powerful creator shaping a single cell into many different species? So yeah, yes, I don't believe in macroevolution. And what that means is that I do not believe that random mutations and natural selection are responsible for the change in morphology of an ancestor creature into a next species. What does this mean? It means that we do not know how this happened, but we know that random mutations cannot be responsible for this. And this is not only my opinion, it is actually, regardless if evolutionists in the mainstream media like to deny it and like to say that this is not the case, but the case is that even people and leaders in the evolutionary scientific community, not media community and not science explainers community, do not find that random mutations and natural selection provide sufficient explanation or proper explanation. And this is why there is a need now for something called the extended modern synthesis. And there is a proposal of 6 mechanisms that can work together, but none of those extra mechanisms actually solves the issue. So the reality on the ground in the scientific community, I have had in the description of the video an article about extended modern synthesis. And you can also look at the proceedings of the Royal Society in November 2016 about why an extended modern synthesis is needed. And it is because the neo-Darwinian mechanism is not an appropriate explanation and not a sufficient explanation for the explanation of the origin of species. So this is the case. What about an all-powerful creator shaping a single cell into many different species? We do not know. For example, in the Quran, he says, قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانْظُرُوا كَيْفَ بَدَأَ الْخَلْقِ. Say, walk in the earth and look how creation has started. So we have a command in the Quran, for example, to make research and to find out how this has happened. And so Muslims should be at the frontier of understanding something about the creation. It also means that if we do serious research, we will find something that shows us the greatness of God. In the Bible, in Genesis, and since I do not memorize the verse, I will say it by the meaning. It says that God has called on the earth and the seas to bring forward the creatures. So there is clear intervention from God, a command. And even in Islam, he says, kun fayakun, he says, be, and something becomes. A command for the creation to take place. So obviously, this means that it wouldn't have happened through a naturalistic process. Otherwise, it wouldn't have needed an extra command. An extra command is needed on top of the existence of the earth and the seas. So this is from the theological point of view. We are going to go into this into depth in later episodes anyway. Another question was, how would evolution tackle the problem of consciousness? He says, I mean, something needs to be aware and copy itself over, right? And why did humans evolve into beings with so much intelligence and awareness and consciousness? Isn't that a bad idea for evolution? Why did the first cell evolve as conscious to think? Because now we have a choice to reproduce or not, and that's dangerous for evolution. Well, evolution does not explain consciousness altogether. Evolution looks more into the morphology and the change in how species look. Now, a naturalist or a materialist will tell you that consciousness is an emergent property of brains, and since animals have sophisticated brains, that this sophistication causes what we call consciousness to emerge. So they will explain consciousness as a product of the brain. However, their theory cannot explain how something that is as complex of a brain exists altogether. Because again, mutations and natural selection cannot explain these things. And as people who believe in the supernatural, we know that consciousness is not the product of the material brain. Consciousness is the product of the soul plus the body. And this is why consciousness will remain an open question to the materialistic worldview. And then question 4, I'm currently reading a popular book that's doing its round around the Islamic community. It's called Islam and Evolution, Al-Ghazali and the Modern Evolution Paradigm by Shu'aib Ahmad Malik. And the rest of the question is a long question. He says in this book, he states that macroevolution is a fact and that evolution can go in line with Islamic theology and gives 4 categories such as Adamic exceptionalism, human exceptionalism, creationism, and no exceptions. He says, personally, I find it difficult to believe different species came from a single cell, but apparently this person is well respected and his book is being mentioned a lot recently. Have you read it, and is it possible to have your thoughts on it? I did not read the book. However, I read the paper that was the precursor to the book, and Dr. Shu'aib himself sent me the paper because I had a dialogue with him on a long Facebook conversation. I might as well put it in the description after we finish the live stream. And after reading the paper and after listening to more than 2 hours of him explaining the contents of his book in one of his interviews, I posted a response to him and I asked him to go on to a live debate or discussion about his arguments, because I think that his arguments are not correct. This is my opinion. Why? Number one, he wants to reconcile between evolution as if it is a fact or a theory of great stature or great standing, while it is not. It is really unacceptable that while the scientific community itself is taking a stop and rethinking whether neo-Darwinism is a proper explanation or not, that Islamic writers will try to find a way to reconcile a theory in crisis with Islam, or even with Christianity, because there is this theistic evolution thing. If somebody watching this and he knows Dr. Shu'aib, and I'm glad to make a debate with him or a discussion, a live one. And I do not accept his views. And we are going to have sessions towards the end about whether Islam, Christianity, and Judaism agree or can be reconciled with the evolutionary point of view about creation, about explaining creatures. All right, the next one is, if evolution is true, then we should just be living like animals, right? Why are humans so interested in advancement, and why do we search so much? Yes, you are right. Well, let's also read the rest of his question. You don't see other animals doing this. For example, a cat is a cat and has always been a cat. A cat just meows, doesn't have advanced language. Like us humans, a cat doesn't need to go to school and do these exams and stress. You don't see lions and tigers having laws and rules in the jungle. Why did we have to evolve into civilized creatures? I once heard that human intelligence is a byproduct. This is just a nice way of saying disability, handicap, or retard. Well, yes, many argue that there is no Darwinian explanation for having capabilities for poetry or mathematics, for example. It doesn't. It wouldn't help to survive in the jungle, where they would say that humans just came from the jungle and became what they are. And it is true. There is no reason to think that evolution will produce this. And the matter that it produces it is something that is not explained by the theory of evolution. Number 6, is there no evidence for any macroevolutions? Fossils, no, there is no evidence for macroevolution. Macroevolution is not observable. Macroevolution means that a creature changes to a new creature with significant changes to the extent you can see that this creature is a different species. There is another definition for species that it will, the two creatures, after some changes, they will not interbreed. But really, you cannot observe a fish changing to a terrestrial animal. It takes millions and millions of years, according to the theory. So the fossil record has so many discontinuities. It is really not a good argument. Argument from fossil record is really a very weak argument. The fossil record is against the theory rather than with it. What do you think of bacteria evolving against medicine? I think he's referring to antibiotic resistance. Is this proof of evolution? I feel it's proof of evolution, but not macroevolution, as I can see bacteria growing into another species. Bacteria evolving against medicine, or actually the development of antibiotic resistance, no, it is not evidence for evolution, because we have no problem with adaptation. Adaptation is okay. What happens is that, and I have already recorded an episode from the Evolution series about antibiotic resistance. But the reality is that antibiotic resistance, it was discovered that antibiotic resistance is a feature in bacteria even before we have invented antibiotics. And this happened, was actually even confirmed when, I think it was a polar bear that was preserved frozen, was dug out, I think it was from the North Pole or something, and they found in its guts, in its belly, bacteria that had antibiotic resistance. And this fossil is very old, it is pre-human. So it occurs that bacteria that are already there today, there is certainty in the scientific community that no matter which antibiotic we will develop, there is already antibiotic resistance sitting somewhere out there, and that it is only a matter of time before the bacteria that has the antibiotic resistance allele will spread more because it has less competition, and that even bacteria can exchange with each other through something called plasmids, genetic material. So if this piece of genetic material is good for another kind of bacteria, they can exchange it. And there are other mechanisms where bacteria will develop resistance. And those mechanisms do not need the theory of evolution. or actually will not lead to accepting macroevolution, because number one, bacteria stays bacteria, and number two, the mechanisms there are not really related to random mutation or natural selection acting on random mutation. There is one type of antibiotic resistance, which is that a mutation will cause a loss of function for a bacteria, and this loss of function will cause it to not be affected by a specific antibiotic, which is more like devolution rather than evolution. So if you take it from that kind of antibiotic resistance, it will also not lead you to have a good explanation or a good support for macroevolution, where creatures will have better complexity, etc. It is a devolution rather than an evolution. It's a good topic that we can actually look at, but no, antibiotic resistance will not provide evidence for macroevolution, not support it. And then number 8, if evolution is true, does it disprove God? What's your take on Adam? Did he suddenly appear, or did he emerge from a previous ancestor, but then had a soul or intelligence placed inside the body? And he goes on, and this is why we are so different to normal animals on Earth. So if evolution is true, does it disprove God? No, it doesn't disprove God, but it says something about God being obscured. There will be a wall, there will be a filter between us and seeing how God is manipulating his creation. Some already say that God has front-loaded the whole thing. So through fine-tuning the parameters of the laws of physics and the laws of physics themselves, etc., the whole sequence that came after was predetermined. I don't think this is true. This is too much. So if evolution is true, no, it will not. It will not disprove God, but it is against. Number one, it's against logic and reason, and number two, since God tells us that we will find him if we do research, I don't think that what he meant by that is that when we look for him in his creation, we will find random mutations. And this is one of the main contentions I have with people like Dr. Shuaib, who says that macroevolution is true and that Islam supports it. And yes, humans are different because we have a soul. But regardless we have a soul or we don't have a soul, there is no Darwinian explanation, there is no plausible Darwinian explanation that a chimp becomes a human, even if we do not have a soul or we have. Number 9, if evolution is true, that means morality and ultimate purpose don't really exist. Does this mean that we can grow humans in a laboratory and use them as human parts, as we do with cars and computers? Yes, if evolution is true, it says that there is no ultimate purpose, but evolutionists will tell you, well, it doesn't mean that we are not moral. It means that we will just act in the way that we would like others to treat us. On the ground, I think, yes, this is the ultimate thing. And it will create a future. If this becomes the dominant belief, I think it will create a future where people will legitimize or think that things that are not moral from the religious perspective can be said to be moral from a materialistic perspective, because there is no aspect of purpose. Number 10, does evolution explain how animals are pre-programmed? For example, a lion knows where to bite an animal to kill it. A certain type of snake, when hatched, goes straight to a lake, etc. Well, actually, I have an argument about that, because you have animals that have pretty complex behaviors, like a beaver that builds a dam, and the bee that builds these hexagonal hives, and uses sign language, and birds that migrate and understand the map of the earth, and know where to go and when to go and where to come back, and salmon fish that goes against the direction of the water current to lay eggs, etc. These are amazing things. My explanation, evolutionists will say, well, cultural evolutions happened, or small behavioral changes happened and accumulated, and then the creature will, the creatures that exhibit this behavior will have better chances of survival. But it's as if you have a creature that does not have the behavior and a creature that has the behavior, and then natural selection will select. Well, the question to you guys is, how did the behavior happen in the first place? This is specified information. How would a beaver understand what a dam is, and how would a bird understand what migration is, and etc., etc.? So they would say the ones that would exhibit the behavior will be selected. How would the behavior arrive? Explain the arrival of the behavior, not the survival of the one that has the behavior. So obviously, animal knowledge or animal behaviors that imply knowledge cannot be explained by the theory of evolution. They will tell you it's instinctive. They will tell you that animals find themselves compelled to do this or that. I don't think that those explanations are plausible, and I have 2 or 3 debates that I have put in the description about the topic. Description of this live stream. Question 11, what's stopping software to one day to suddenly get a conscious and just start replicating itself and creating Windows 13? Well, evolutionists, because they think that there is no soul, they think that at one point there will be a singularity and that computers will be conscious. This is a result of the evolutionary thinking. The next one, how can a sea or land species safely evolve into a bird? Well, they can't, because I don't accept macroevolution. And if there is a mechanism, we would love really evolutionists to show us, to give real evidence how a bird becomes a bird starting from a terrestrial animal. Can you simply summarize Lamarckism, how it is different to Darwinism, and are there any other forms of evolution theory that you know of? Lamarckism is, evolutionists do not like Lamarckism, and Lamarckism is the idea that when a creature uses a specific organ, and this organ gets better because there is environmental stress on him or there is a need, then the betterment of this organ will be inherited to his offspring. And hence the organism will change. How it's different from Darwinism? Darwinism puts intent and thinking. There is no place for intent and thinking and wanting something in Darwinism. It is random. There is a random mutation that creates plenty of changes, and the changes that give an advantage will be selected by natural selection. So more offsprings will be there for the creatures who have this feature. Darwinism is based on a random engine and nature just giving better chances for those who are lucky to get the random change that happens to be good for their environment. Okay, the next one, is Luca related to deep time, or there is difference? Luca is deep in time, so it's expected that Luca happened somewhere like 3.5 billion years ago. Is it related to deep time? Yes, because it took too much time for Luca, according to the theory, to become multicellular, like 2 billion years, or actually 3 billion years, something. And then, so if there wasn't that much time, then Luca wouldn't have become what it is. But Luca is separate from deep time. Evolution addresses origin of life or origin of species. Evolution addresses the origin of species. However, the demarcation, the separation between origin of life and origin of species gets blurred in a certain area. It depends what would you consider to be the first life. So origin of life researchers might tell you there will be something like a protocell, which has something like a membrane and very primitive, basic genetic material inside, maybe RNA. And if you consider this to be living, it can replicate and it can maintain homeostasis. If you consider this to be living, then evolution will need to explain how DNA came into place and how it has all this information. If you consider that this is not living and then something else is living, and you move forward and you say, well, evolution will start from Luca, and Luca had DNA, then you move from there forward, and you do not want to explain origin of life. Generally, evolutionists would avoid going into the origin of life. But many questions that pertain to evolution will take you back to the origin of life, because at the end, you need to ask, where did the information come from? So these are the questions I received. Let's go now to the comments I have on the live chat. Okay, okay. Okay. Here we have okay. Okay, this is not really related to evolution, but our friend Otango here says, Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and life. Nobody comes to the Father than through me, so it's not Islam nor Muhammad, but faith in Jesus that saves. Well, every prophet who comes and shows people the path to God, he becomes the representation of the truth and the way that people should lead their life. And hence, he becomes the way to God. And our obligation is to follow the prophets of God. So when Jesus came to Jews, they should follow him because he is the way. And when Prophet Muhammad comes to the world, we should follow him because now he is the way. And this biologist says, where we ask questions, you ask questions by registering to the course, and then you will receive an email. It will give you an email address to which you can send your questions, and your questions will be answered in the episode, in the live stream. Now we have like 4 remarks before we conclude. So the first one is, do subscribe to the course, and you use this link in the description, and when you subscribe, you receive emails. Some of the emails, the tricky thing is that some of the emails, maybe all of them, will go to your spam or promotions or clutter or junk folder because they have images and links and so please check it there and mark it as not junk so it wouldn't go to the junk. Because I have sent emails to the course participants, and I see that only 30% of them have opened the email. So my guess is that it went to the junk or promotions and they didn't notice it. So you will receive a couple of emails before the live session. For example, if there's plenty of material, you receive an email on Monday and maybe another email on Wednesday. If it's less material, maybe you receive on Wednesday. But let's say Mondays, you receive the material that you need to review, the session and supporting material. And then we have the live session on Saturdays, just like today, 4 p.m. GMT. My second remark would be, please invite your family and friends, and please do participate on the live streams. My third remark will be, if there are evolutionary biologists who have seen this, and they would like to challenge me on the content of the sessions, of the recorded sessions, especially when we go into the deeper arguments, I would love that. Send me your, register the course, send me your credentials, and tell me that you would love to challenge me on something. And we can do special episodes where I'll be glad to host a challenge. Make sure you check your spam and promotions and junk folders, as I said, and whitelist the channel, mark it as not junk, and feel free to suggest special session topics if you'd like, also through sending the emails. And as I said, the schedule for the episode is that you will receive an email for the material on Monday, and an email on Wednesday, and then you need to watch and send questions, and then we have the live streams on Saturday. So that's all today. Thank you all for attending this live stream. I hope you have enjoyed it. This will get better and better as you send more questions. The objective of the live stream is to receive and respond to your questions. The objective of the recorded sessions is to give you the content. The next thing is that we will go into random mutations and then natural selection, and we'll go into what is really problematic about macroevolution, and then we will look into how to take care not to fall into pitfalls while looking into evolutionary literature, reading or watching science explainers, and how we could respond to arguments. And then we would go into theological aspect of whether evolution can be or cannot be reconciled with the theological narrative. So thank you for being here. It was really fun. Those who are on the live stream, thank you. Free Your Mind says that he loves the live stream. Jazakallah khairan. Assalam. I'm looking forward to the next. Yes, and I really enjoyed your presence. Thank you very much for those who attended live. This is the first one, and we have this problem that many have not opened the emails. So please send this to your family and friends, and I'll see you again next Saturday. And watch out for the emails on Mondays and Wednesdays about the material for our next session, which will be about mutations. What are they, and what is claimed that they do, and why or why not this is not reasonable. So see you again soon. And just to end this, I will end this by our wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and see you all soon. Love your presence, and goodbye. Peace be upon you all.